I'll be reading verses 10 through 18. Philippians 4, verses 10 through 18. But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at least you have revived your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity. Now that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatsoever circumstances I am, I know how to get along with humble means and also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Nevertheless, you have done well to share with me in my affliction. You yourselves also know, Philippians, that at the first preaching of the gospel, after I left Macedonia, no church shared with me in the matter of giving and receiving, but you alone. For even in Thessalonica, you sent a gift more than once for my needs. Not that I seek the gift itself, but I seek for the profit which increases to your account. But I have received everything in full and have an abundance. I am amply supplied, having received from Epaphroditus that you have sent a fragrant aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God. So when you think about the examples that we have in the New Testament, it's showing us that churches and individuals supported preachers and gave to churches like in Jerusalem, and they gave the money, and it was taken by an individual to, again, carry on the work of the Lord. And what I like about that is that Paul tells the Philippians that they gave a fragrant aroma, that the Lord was pleased and it was an acceptable sacrifices. So I can't thank the individuals enough who gave the money for this trip to take over there and buy the supplies and to supply the needs that the church had over there and also the individual families over there. Again, we took about 300 pounds of food, and then we took flashlights and lanterns and batteries, medicines. We had a pharmacist here that helped us out a little bit and got us some discount on some medicines that we took over there if they had needs. And again, the things they asked for were just essential things. Beans and rice and pasta, nuts and tuna in the packages. Again, it wasn't nothing extravagant they wanted. They just wanted the bare necessities. And I just appreciate the brothers and sisters that gave towards this. And also we had several churches around the United States that gave some money. What we found out that one of the greatest needs, again, talking to them, is that there is no electricity. And so they have got one generator. And so our future needs, again, we still have money left over. We're going to try to, Dennis and I are working, along with Mike, and try to ship some generators over there. But they don't expect to have any electricity before 2019 in their part of Dominica. Again, there's two big cities, the capital, and if you've seen some pictures on the internet, was just utterly destroyed. But again, they'll take care of the capital first, and then where the medical school is in Portsmouth is the second biggest city. And it kind of interesting, that Ross Medical School has been on a boat holding classes, but they've rented some space at the University of Tennessee. And that's where they're sending their students, is to finish this year out over there in Knoxville at some classes and dorms that they rented out over there. Give you a little bit of trip description. Everybody knows we were scheduled to leave Saturday morning at 5:30, and we had, I guess Leah Pickering was going to get up because she didn't have school that morning and take us. I went to the office, or back at the office, about 1 o'clock Thursday afternoon, and had an email that said our flight was leaving Friday morning at 8 o'clock. Seabourn had canceled or had changed their schedule, and so we couldn't make our planes. So our schedule was to spend 24 hours on Friday night in Puerto Rico and 24 hours on Sunday night before we could get back on Monday. And so then we had to scramble. Dennis and Mike were still at work. I had to call and say, hey, we're leaving in the morning, and not on Saturday morning. And also I think Dennis gave Bradley a call and said, hey, we need a taxi cab. And so Bradley got stuck with taking us to the airport again, which it seemed like it happens every year to him. But we left again at 8 o'clock on Friday morning. We got to San Juan, and then we bought these sleeping bags to sleep on the floor in the airport. Again, you could see it just seemed like God was with us on our whole trip. They found us a room in a hotel at the airport. And she apologized that she could only find one room. I said we were ready to sleep on the floor. One room was awful nice, and so I had to give her a hug because I couldn't imagine that we'd get a hotel room. And what they had done is most of the hotels on the island are closed down. They still don't have very much electricity in San Juan. All your resorts are closed, and the emergency workers are staying in all the hotels that are open, and so that's where they were staying. The San Juan Hotel is one of the hotels, and they happened to have one room available. And so we left and got to Dominica the next day at 1:30, made it to the village about 3:30. Elkin's son picked us up with a bus because I told him we had about 12 or 13 suitcases or bags, and no way we could fit in one of those little cars. And so they found somebody to bring what they call a bus, which is basically just about a 8-seater, I guess, little small minivan, but we're able to put all our luggage in there. Interesting part is in the front seat, his windshield had been smashed, and that's what had happened during the hurricane. Something hit his car, and part of the windshield was smashed. It looked like it was gonna cave in at any minute, but we happened to make it. We put Mike in the front seat. We knew we could handle it, and he rode up front with the driver. But we got to the village, and again, it was just devastating. The destruction as we see, and I know everybody's wanting to see some pictures, and we'll get to those shortly, but we'll show the pictures of the devastation. But it's just hard to imagine, what the 200-mile-an-hour winds will do for 4 or 5 hours to an island. But again, everything went well. We left Sunday morning. We worshiped with them in the house, as I'll show some pictures where they worshiped in the building they worship in. It's a government building. It has collapsed. So again, they could no longer worship there, and so we worshiped in the house. And again, we only spent one night there, and again, because of the scheduling change, we had to get back on the airplane at 1:30 on Sunday. Supposed to spend 24 hours again in the airport on Sunday and leave Monday afternoon. Again, we went up there and begged and pleaded, and I cried a little bit, and we caught the last airplane out of San Juan to Atlanta. And again, had to put a plug in for Lee and Delta Airlines. Again, they just were great working with us, and I'm sure they've been through these things for the last 8 weeks after this hurricane about trying to get people in and out. But again, they were just great and helped us, and we got back home on Sunday night instead of Monday night. What I'd like to do now is to read a letter that Elkin has written. We all know as elders, Elkin is not really good about giving reports or getting reports to us, and we constantly, every time I go over there, I get to make fun of him. But anyways, Yvonne is great about writing where Elkin is not good at all. But here's a letter he wanted to address to Jackson Heights Church and to the brethren here. He says, this year has quickly moved on in its path onto another year, and a lot has happened, and so fast. Yvonne, Shim, and I are the only ones left at home. Everyone else has gone. Elkin's mother and father have got off the island. She's got a health issue. Her daughter has got off the island, and their other son is on the island of St. Kitts working. And they've only talked to him one time in the last 5 months. And so that's, again, they are by themselves. For a home that housed 20 people during the Hurricane Maria, we are now warmly greeted with the presence of Brother Charlie and Mike and Dennis. What a wonderful brethren they are, and I mean that to all of you. I remember the relief examples that are recorded all through Paul's accounts in the New Testament. I indeed thank all of you, one way or another, who contribute to this relief effort on behalf of the other members of our family and of the church family. I understand you were touched with concern, compassion, and love for us, this being so true with the presence of Mike and Dennis and Charlie here today. Unlike the supplies we have received, these supplies from you are so different. The only supplies they had received was water and rice. And we even brought rice with us, but they have about 100 pounds of rice, I guess, in their house, and we supplied more rice, and that's what we were fed when we were there, rice and beans. But anyways, they were good. But he just says he wants to thank you again for the supplies. Like everyone else, we have suffered minimal damage from water. I had battened up the windows and my doors and windows with plywood in the afternoon prior to the storm. Secure as I could of all the materials like nails from the church building site, and prepare all the welcome those who were coming to ride the hurricane with us. And we were successful. My job was throughout to monitor the waters that were escaping, partially opening my east and west side windows to prevent pressure from building up on the inside and to help reduce the fear among ourselves. We sang spiritual songs all through the hurricane. We were survivors. We survived the loss of the church building site. They lost, again, a lot of lumber and plywood that was there. And he even mentions that even after the police were involved, another individual came and tried to steal some remaining 2x4 lumber under the building. We therefore have to buy lumber again to place and form the work again. Business places are not functional as before, therefore we cannot purchase building materials. We've been meeting at my home ever since the hurricane. Prior to the hurricane, we were in an advanced state of preparation at the church building, but everything has been blown away. Recovery is going to be slow, but again, it's sad, and I don't know whether we'll get there. And he talks a little bit about politicians, which I can relate to. But quite a number of people have left the island. They said about 15% have left the island if you'll view some of the pictures, because their houses are no longer there. So they're able to get off the island and go be with families. And some of them will never come back probably because there is no insurance on the islands. So again, once you've lost your house, you've lost about everything. And we're showing those pictures. He says that 98% of the homes were demolished or destroyed in La Plaine, which is his village. We do have drinking water. I guess we were there. The water came on like 2 days before we got there, and it's only so far up the island because the pumping stations were blown away and damaged, and so only part of the village does have water, but luckily he did have water. All my crops were destroyed together with Brother Joe's and David's and Boland's. Those are members of the church there. Brother Boland's home has been demolished completely, but lives in a makeshift shed, and we'll show you some pictures of those. Brother Joe and Brother David's houses did survive with minimal damage. There's not going to be electricity, not before late 2018 or 19. A personal generator is a priority at present. A few people have expressed interest for coming to church after the church building is completed. And again, you know, I've mentioned this several times. You're not a real religion unless you got a building over there. And some of the buildings, churches over there that have been there, like the Catholic Church has been there for hundreds of years. Again, there's a lot of Catholic brethren over there because they do have a building. So again, that's our hope, and we pray that the building can be completed very soon. But the real environment remains like the one where we simply ask questions, that is, what's the next step forward? But we are resilient as ever and have decided to continue to do what we know how to do best. And once again, thanks to all of your expressed concerns, compassion, and the statement of true love as demonstrated further through your relief assistance. May God continue to bless you all, protect and keep you in good health physically, and most important, keep you spiritually. Love you all, and bye. Elkin Vigilant. So again, that's the letter he wanted to write. I'll put it on the board. And what I did, if you've ever seen Elkin's letters, he's got beautiful handwriting. It's just hard to make a lot of the words out. So my wife printed this up where everybody could read it very easily, and also put exactly what he wrote up on the board also. So now before we start the pictures, what I'd like to do, we talk about what does 200 miles an hour wind sound like. Yvonne recorded the wind that was coming through the house as they were in the house. So Mike has got it on his phone. It will just give you a little tidbit of what 200 mile an hour sounds like in a bunker. Mike, if you will, come up and play that for everybody.
Stood out from Yvonne's house and spoke to a young man, that said he heard it coming, and said it rocked the house where they were in for several minutes. He said then it got deathly quiet. He steps outside and he can see the stars. The eye of the hurricane came right through them, and then he heard it coming again. That man said when it came through, he said he found an old woman in the street, picks her up, brings her back in the house. Then the priest, the roof fell in on his head of the Catholic Church down from him, picks him up, brings him in the house. He said then this comes through a second time. He said it's the longest night they ever spent. He said nobody slept, not the entire night.
I just thought that was interesting to kind of relate, you know, how would you feel for 4 or 5 hours, the wind blowing through your house like that? And you could see why they sang spiritual songs for 4 or 5 hours, not knowing whether they would survive. And that's how the whole village was like. And again, because it did hit them head on that part of the island. Now we'll go to the pictures. Again, try to reinforce some of the things. Again, the trip. Talk about shut down. They lost a lot of the roof and some terminals at San Juan Airport, and about half the airport, I would say, was closed down still after seven or 8 weeks that the hurricane had already gone through there. And we've seen a lot of pictures of San Juan and the damage there, and they're talking about up to, what, $90 billion they need to try to get the island of San Juan, to Puerto Rico, back up and running. And as we stayed in the hotel, we talked to a girl that worked at the hotel, and she said it'll probably be 10 years before the Puerto Rico will be back to normal. It's just going to take them that long to fix that island up. And it seemed like when she says 10 years, we're talking about where her family was and how they weren't able to get to them and had to bring them water on weekends to their village in Puerto Rico. But could you imagine, how many more hurricanes might come through before that 10 years is up? That's a scary part. This may be a once in a 100-year hurricane, but again, those things happen, and that's got to be a scary thing to think about. It could happen any year as far as hurricanes are concerned. Here we are flying. I think you get a pretty idea. If you look at all the blue, tarps on top of the roofs, when you fly into Puerto Rico, it just seems like there's just thousands of blue tarps on the roofs in Puerto Rico, and it's the same thing in Dominica. And it just kind of brings it back to see or to notice exactly how many roofs are missing and how much damage from the... Here's in the flight as we're coming in. Again, this is the picture of the trees. Now, we always talk about this island being kind of like, the Garden of Eden kind of, because everything is so green and so lush. Well, look at the trees there. This is what it looked like flying through those mountains as we were coming in. It's just hard to imagine. The island looks like they had dropped bombs, and it just absolutely knocked every tree down, or the majority of the trees, and all the leaves are gone. That's what the strangest thing is. There's just no leaves on hardly any of the trees. Periodically, you would see some green leaves on some trees, but the majority of just miles and miles and miles is what this island looked like as we were flying it in. And after we got to the airport, here's a couple of pictures. Again, this is kind of the scenery that you see on the way to La Plaine. It's just hard to imagine. And as Mike and I and even Dennis talked about, we've seen parts of the island we had never ever seen, traveling the same roads year after year after year, because all the foliage is gone. And so you're seeing villages you didn't even know existed back in the background. You're seeing houses you've never seen before, or schools, or vegetation that you didn't even know was there. But again, this just kind of shows you, what it looked like. It's just hard to imagine. Now, we think we got potholes and we got problems on our roads. And here's just going down the main thoroughfare to, this is probably 10 miles from La Plaine or so. And they've been working on these roads for years, and they've been in some really good shape. As you see to the side there, there's concrete there, and they've laid out this concrete and, stop it from flooding and washing out these roads. And so they've been doing a lot of work. And a lot of this has come to naught. You see the concrete caught the boulders there and just kept them there. And you see the space, a dump truck or a big truck coming to bring supplies or do work cannot make it past this boulder here. So again, there was a lot of black marks you could see on that rock there where the tires had scraped. And but it's just hard to imagine what the roads look like. Here's some of the concrete where you see this. A lot of this will have to be done over again because of the damage that the flooding had done to the roads. And here's what like pictures of maybe some landslides. You're just seeing this over and over and over again as you were traveling to La Plaine in different villages and different areas. And again, Dennis and Mike took, I don't know, hundreds of pictures, and so we had to kind of narrow it down. We'd be here all night. But just to kind of give you an idea about what the landscape looked like instead of being green and lush. Again, another picture of the road or bridge work that's going on. And a lot of areas where they had really fixed up some problem areas are right back, and most of the areas are worse than what it was before. Here is, we got to Elkin's house, but here is Elkin's backyard. All those trees and majority of the trees are gone that had been there, and there's a little valley that's back down in there. You can see they had where they kept some chickens and everything had been damaged, and the roof and where they kept the chickens inside were blown away. Here's a picture of the food that we brought. Again, most of it came out of our suitcase. The only thing that we didn't bring there that's in the picture, I think, is the bottled water. They had gotten bottled water. Some relief groups had come around and give out some bottled water. And the funny thing is, they go to the village, these relief groups, and they call all the pastors or the preachers or the reverends. They're the ones that go to pick up the supplies, and they hand out the supplies to their church or their members or their family groups. And so Elkin had handed out, I forget how many bottles of water throughout the village, and but this is some that he had for his own house. Dennis had done a lot of studying about water purification, and we brought some water for purification buckets, and we were just kind of overwhelmed that they had water, but we got to give those purification buckets to a couple of the members that do not have water where they can use. And so it was a great idea that Dennis had. And those buckets sitting, those white buckets sitting in the background, that's just a water purification system that Dennis had worked on and found where he could get some. Again, this picture's again of Elkin's yard and the damage that it had done. And you just see the trees and all of his avocado and mango and special trees and vegetables that he had a supply of are damaged or gone. The picture to the right there, be your on my left. Is the old house that he used to live in there. They took the siding off, and I'll show a picture of that. But that house had been there maybe 100 years and had never been damaged by a hurricane. And what it done to that house, it lifted it off its foundation and moved it over, took the roof off and took a wall out. But for no telling how many hurricanes it had been through, but again, this is one of those hurricanes that just comes along, periodically and did a lot of damage. But I'll show a better picture. There it is, where it damaged the house. And he's got a tarp over it, and the wall is on your right-hand side. But took the shingles off the house. It had those old type of, if you call them like those asbestos shingles, was on the outside of it, and they were all blown off. And I'm just glad they didn't have to ride the hurricane out in this house, with all the number of people that they had. Here's a before picture. Here's that house that I just showed you that they used to live in. Again, those. See all the trees around it and all the vegetation in front of that house. Again, I think there's a mango tree to the right, but that's all the vegetation that was there, the last several years that we've been visiting. There's, again, a picture from their front porch that they live in now, and just look at all the vegetation. And then there's the picture now. It's just hard to imagine. And I know Carolyn mentioned Elkin's brother lives not 100 yards from his house, and Carolyn had never seen his house before until she seen some pictures and found out, well, whose house is that? That's where Elkin's brother lived. But again, all the trees had been blown away, and you could see his house perfectly from Elkin's house. So again, there's the damage that you can see. Now, this is a picture from Elkin's front porch, and I had never seen the ocean from their house. But all the trees and vegetation had been damaged and blown away or blown over. And tell you, this is Sunday morning. We got up for worship service, and here was our picture on Sunday morning. And Mike and Dennis and I, we were just bragging how beautiful the ocean was. And I mentioned, make sure that you keep those trees cut down. They look at me like I was crazy. They don't even want to see the ocean. They don't have anything to do with the ocean. They just call it the angry sea. They care less about an ocean. I said, you got $1 million view here that people pay millions of dollars to get a view of the ocean and live by the ocean, and they don't even want to see it. And so that was kind of hard to explain to people that they don't want to see the ocean. But most of them are just really scared of the ocean. You can see why. But again, just a beautiful, beautiful picture. And here's Elkin and Yvonne and their oldest son, Shem. Again, in front of their house as we were getting ready to leave. One of the last pictures we took at the house. And Shem drove us back to the airport. Elkin's car that he had sustained a little bit of damage during the hurricane. Shem's, again, did not sustain any damage. Here's the picture of the school building we show every year. This is the before. We're going to show several of these before and after pictures, but this is a picture we love to show where we hold the Vacation Bible School. I know Tammy and y'all that have been there, and taught, and Joe and Debbie, and this is just a beautiful sight to see where they go to school. And this is what it looks like now. There's no roofs on any of the buildings. Has been blown out, so they haven't had school since. And they were talking about they were going to try to start school back up by putting some tents up. But not everybody will be able to go back to school this year. And I don't know, didn't ask Elkin why everybody wasn't going to go to school, or maybe just a certain grade. But again, you just see the devastation. And also there's people living in those, in the school there, are staying there, and they have been since the hurricane because their houses were just demolished. And so they are living in that school. Right back behind it is an office building, and it still has its roof. And so there's quite a few people living in there where the office area is, where the principal and office staff work. Here's a picture of the river that most everybody's seen has been down there. It's right down from in their village, the Sorry River, I guess, and we have cookouts there. We go down, and when we're there, we'll have a meal down there cooked. And you see the trees all around there, the ones to the left and the big trees on the right. And this is what it looks like now. Again, you see the devastation. There's still trees there, but all the tall trees are gone, and the majority of them on the right-hand side there. And look how the river has changed because of the floods that came from the hurricane. Here's what our telephone poles look like. When you talk about how come they're not going to have electricity for a year, almost every telephone pole that we pass, some of them we went under, and some of them we went over, and some of them we went around. But almost everyone is on the ground or leaning like this. And in those villages, they just connect wire upon wire upon wire. And those old wooden telephone poles. And again, they're not like telephone poles that we have. And I'm going to see they're probably palm trees or something and not treated, but again, you can see how they're overloaded. And again, all of them, or quite a few, are on the ground. Here's a good picture before. As you look at the mountain, you look at the vegetation there, there's a pump station right there that is just above. It's right across from where the government building is, where we worship. And there's a pump station there, and there's a telephone station there. And look at all the vegetation, and you really can't see any houses there. And then here's the picture. And you can see all the houses, the pumping station is gone. And look at the mountains, and there's no vegetation left on those mountains. And like I said, it's just hard to relate to, but that's almost exactly the same picture. And like I said, that's when you see that there's a lot of houses you never even knew were there, except because of the damage. Now you can see them where you never were able to see them before. Here's the church building that they worshiped at, the government building. As you see, it has collapsed and fell in. And this is where we always worshiped on Sunday mornings and Sunday nights and Tuesday nights. So again, the government building, where they meet also, where they have their meetings as far as government's concerned in the village, all the village leaders, this is where they meet. So again, I don't know where they're meeting now, but again, it has collapsed, and that's the roof. Here's a short video, lasts about a minute, and this is the village that we drove through. There's a telephone pole, all the lines on the ground. All the lines are all around the island, just on the ground. And this is going up the street just past Elkin's house up to the top of the hill. But you can see the devastation in that village. And most of the, I was trying to tell some, majority of the houses had the tin roofs or the metal roofs, and if you had those, more than likely they were gone. The concrete roofs, again, very little damage, maybe some windows or doors. But we put the new roof, and you got those corkscrew nails. It seemed like those survived. But when you put years ago nailed up a barn, you put a straight nail in or whatever nails they'd come up with, and most of those were lost and blown away. Those roofs and why they are missing. There's another picture again of just wire just laying on the ground. Every street you ride down, they're just lying, on the ground, riding over. So, it's not like they could take those same lines and put them back up. Again, they're going to have to run new lines throughout the whole island because those have been on the ground, 7-8 weeks now, and they're still just laying in the road and they've been run over. And tell you another interesting story. Last year, they had started to put up these solar lights, these big metal poles with solar lights on them, and I'd say approximately there was 100 of them on this one road. And as we were going in, Dennis and I were looking at them, and they said, "Boy, the hurricane just blew those poles down." And I think Dennis said it must be Chinese poles or something, but maybe the Chinese put them up. But so we observed that, and so we were asking Elkin about it. Said, about the damage, and tell him all the poles. Well, what happens is the bottom of those poles got these four long bolts sticking up, and what the people were doing, they were undoing those bolts, and they were stealing the lights off of those poles there. They brought them down the ground. Those were solar lights. They could take it home and use it at home. And what they do, being solar lights, it would recharge itself. So they could use it at night to light up their house, and then again, take it outside and charge it up the next day. So they're using it for light. So like I said, I would say at least 100 poles were on the ground. And I was just shocked when, how many poles or how many people had stolen those lights. And again, it doesn't matter where you're at, when bad things happen, there's always looters. We've seen that in Texas, and we see it wherever the hurricane. Same thing in the village here. There was a lot of looting going on, a lot of things happened, and Elkin, told us some stories. But, people are people all over. They're the same. And, you might not think that people would do some of those things in close-knit villages, but they did. There's good and bad people everywhere. This is what some of those familiar. This is the Echo Mart. It's a store that we always go, but this road leads up to the church building. And I'll show you a picture of a couple minutes of the church building. But this road now was being repaired, and they were really fixing this road up. Now you can't go. It's impassable to go up this part of the road to get up to the top of the village. You have to go around. And I'll show you a good picture of what they were doing. But they were really fixing this road up. Again, a lot of it was destroyed, and it'll probably be years before they will come back and fix this road or finish fixing the road. There's standing outside the church building, you see in the background to the right there, and there's the road that was fixed. Where Elkin's standing right there is where they had stopped working before the hurricane. So you can see going up the rest of that hill, it's in really good shape especially for the village is concerned. But again, that has been will not be fixed again. And we went over this road. Elkin put down some rocks where we could drop down off this and turn to the left and go around instead of down the road. But just to give you an idea of the mountains in the back of the vegetation that's been wiped out. And here's a story. These are right here a couple that are members of the church, and I told you they lost their house. We are standing on the foundation of their house right there. All that's left is the foundation. It was completely blown away, and they have no house. And so again, with some of the money that we have left over, we hopefully, whenever they can get materials and able to get some, some kind of supplies, would try to help them with rebuilding this house. And we mentioned that he lived in a shed, but there again is the foundation, and it was a small house to begin with. And that's Mrs. Boland there. And that's what he built down there to the left right there is the shed that they're living in. And Mr. Boland's down there we're going to talk with him. It's basically big enough for two people could sleep in it. They do have propane. They got supplies, so they do cook with propane gas if you have a stove. Now, the Bolands don't have a stove. But again, they find ways to overcome that. And look in the background, up on top of that hill there, you see the damage to the trees up there on top of that hill. And here we are talking to them right before we leave, so we took a couple of pictures. And they're telling us the story about how it happened and what happened there during the hurricane. And we're saying goodbye here. And look at the palm tree in the back. Again, it has no palms. And there's the shed that he built again. And you look, a beautiful picture, a beautiful sight living up on top of that mountain there. Background, the ocean. Another picture of the ocean there. And that's it. That's all the pictures we have. But again, they suffered, but it's kind of like they're still content, like Paul said. He was content in riches. He was content in hunger. They are a content people. A lot. So again, from the bottom of my heart, I can't help but thank you that contributed. And again, I'm just an extension of the congregation here, the church. We support Elkin. And, I'm just the crazy people that go down there to this village and try to help them out. But again, they are struggling, and it'll be a struggle for a while. But Elkin and Yvonne just thanked us over and over and over again. I just appreciate everybody that contributed or was able to contribute. And I know you look at what we had in the United States, we contributed so much money to Texas, and what a blessing we were to those churches down there in Texas. And, from the bottom of my heart, I can't say that I know of a more giving people than the congregation here, and I just appreciate how you have helped us, not only in Texas, but in Dominica, and just appreciate that. So as we go all around the world, Jesus gave us the command, to convert to His words and to follow His commands and go baptizing to everybody that hears the word and what they need to do to become Christians and to get to heaven and to need to obey the words of Jesus Christ. If there's anybody in the audience tonight that needs to put Jesus on in baptism, or if there's anybody that has a problem that want to come to the church and we can help you with that, come now as we stand and sing.